My name is Alex Castro, and really what the session is about today is decision making, right? And we're going to be talking about decision making because of the biases that we use in decision making. And at the end of the day, really, it's the root cause of most of the headaches in the room. When projects get approved, how they get selected, all of those things, that initiation process is really at the root as to where things begin to lead, okay? So have a seat anywhere, help yourself. So joining me is Kevin Patton. He's the former Chief Operating Officer for the state of Florida, okay? And David Brown, who is the former, I hate using former, retired. You're both retired, right? Are you retired? It's such a, I don't know why I don't like saying that, but Dave's just retired as the Deputy Director for California State Lands Commission. We were going to have I always get his title bungled up a little bit. He was the Chief Commissioner for Health and Human Services for the state of Texas, but he had a personal emergency on Sunday and he couldn't fly in, so unfortunately he won't be here. So you have to settle for us. So the thing that I want to really kind of kick off for is that 40% of all strategic initiatives that are approved generate zero value. So the money goes out and nothing comes back. And this is not a government number. This is a institutional strategic decision-making number, right? The challenge is that being in government, you look at government. It's the thing that you focus on. And government gets impacted by a lot of different opinions and a lot of different approaches and feels really kind of beat up on certain things. The reality is your numbers are really no different than anybody else's numbers. So in the process of making decisions, things are invested in that don't generate that return, don't generate that expected value coming back. And in government, that value is to citizenry. You invest, put a program out, enhance a program through a technology project or not, maybe it's a process improvement, and what happens is the value isn't there, okay? And this is 15 years of data being collected over the industry that basically says that 4 out of $10 spent generates no value. All right. So as we go through, or I kind of go through some of these points, what I'm going to ask is that we change the mindset just a little bit. And we not talk about success and failure. Because success and failure are not a metric. It doesn't tell us anything. What may be a success to you may be a failure to me, or a medium success to me. And so when I say success, it doesn't mean anything anymore. It doesn't have this point of definition that says really huge, because we interpret it. It's an interpreted thing. It's a subjective thing. So what I'm going to ask you to do is consider that whenever a strategic investment is considered, that is a loan being made into operations. Okay? Executives or people involved in the decision-making process are lending money into the operation. And the way that we measure whether a loan is a good loan or a bad loan is default rate. Did I get a return based on the calculations that I was expecting on that investment? And so a more accurate metric is default rate. Okay? So I just kind of ask you to suspend your disbelief for a minute and walk with me down this path. All right? So I want to talk a little bit about what that decision making kind of looks like. There's a pharmacy like CVS, but called Boots in Europe. Okay? And Boots, like everybody else, is competing for market share. They're competing for revenue. They're competing to be able to get return to investors, all the things that we always read about and the pressures that live in the world. And they were very challenged because the thing that many people are not really truly aware of is that there is no growth right now. There's zero. GDP is nearly flat. Markets are not moving. So growth in private sector measurement is I'm taking customers and share of wallet away from you. That's my growth. I'm not growing more customers. There aren't more customers. All I'm doing is stealing pie from somebody else. Okay? And so the difficulty that Boots had is that they weren't able to steal more pie from people. And so they came up with a strategy that they were going to go into healthcare at the pharmacy level. So you would go to the pharmacy and you would get some healthcare, right? You could see sort of a physician's assistant or just like a part-time doctor, and you could get treatment at the pharmacy. So they rolled this whole thing out. And in the decision-making process, there was a lot of conflict within senior management at Boots. And not only from senior management, from also exterior analysts. And they were really questioning what was going to happen. So they started to roll it out, and what they found is that the profit on each one of those cases where they were treating people in a pharmacy wasn't what they thought it would be. And they were making pharmacists do doctor things, or they were making cashiers do pharmacy things. And suddenly the system got stressed, the roles weren't in the right place, the profit wasn't there, and it resulted in the CEO being fired. And it resulted in the CFO being fired. And it resulted in the restructuring of most of the management team. Okay? They wound up laying off 700 people. They wrote off $150 million in the process. Right? They lost. And what led it to that point, right? What led to that decision making was this bias, this thing that said, this is a good idea. And because it's a good idea, we should do it. How many people have heard that before? Say aye. Aye, right? Okay. So now, if you really measure what's going on, right? And we're in a world of measurement now. Data, metrics, analytics, okay? These are the metrics that are starting to come back. 75% of executives believe that any technology initiative is going to fail before it even starts. Right? These are survey results that were conducted. All right? And so everybody has gotten into a position where they are almost embeddedly accepting the fact, the outcome, that it is not going to go well, but they're going to trudge down this road and hope becomes the strategy. All right? And the metrics aren't stuff that you know, are just, I didn't select these from some, you know, crazy blog out there that was like somebody trying to push an agenda somewhere. These are very calculated metrics from, I think, 2,500 different executives from Fortune 5,000 companies. All right? And it's very real. And I think that we all experience this, right? And we sit there and we're like, what are they thinking? What are they doing? Why are they doing this? Why are they picking this? All right? And so this is a phrase that I kind of hijacked from a quote about remarriage, actually. People who are divorced and then get remarried, right? But I thought it was applicable to some degree, right? In the sense that when we go into that strategic decision making, we get into a position where we ignore our experience and we ignore the data and we ignore other things, and what we want to do is we want to believe our bias, that we think we can, we know we can, we're going to trudge through it, we're going to make it work. And the challenge that happens is that the reality starts to catch up once we begin to engage, and the data starts to come back, and we start to fall into that pool of previous metrics that say nobody really believed that we could be successful. More often, that most of the program people are completely misaligned with what's happening, and there isn't a lot of good support in the process. And the decision was made on bias. It was made on the fact that I think I know, right? And I believe that this is a good idea, right? So what happens as executives, we have a tool, highest tech tools. Tools are going to get us there, right? We have a vision. We know what we want to do. We're standing on the rock. We can see. So we make the leap. Woohoo! Here we go. We're down the path, right? And then we hit this, right? When all we really wanted was this, right? And that's that surprise. It's that surprise in the process that doesn't really get countered into the decision-making process. So now we're absorbing projects that realistically we should never have done, or we should have retarded because we simply weren't ready to do. But the project management lifecycle is going to fix that. And the data basically says it doesn't. 15 years of data say it doesn't, right? So again, we're not looking at success and failure. That's not what it's about. When the project is approved, it is a loan of money into operations with an expectation of a return. And what we want to measure is, did operations succeed or did they default on that loan? And what we want to do is reduce the default rate, which is going to increase leveraging of capital, and it's going to increase the ability to do more things. Yeah?
What metric do you use to measure?
We're going to do that.
All right.
It's a good question. Thank you. So, again, our reality versus what's happening, and we've all lived through the process. That's what a lot of this conference is about, is the fact that reality always takes over and it wins, right? And what we need to do is really get in touch with, what does that reality mean? What does it look like? Okay? So I'm going to do a poll. This kind of works and kind of doesn't sometimes, so help me a little bit. Be a friend. There we go. Ha! All right. So it's an interactive part right now, okay? So in your device, you can go to the website, but for texting purposes, text in MCorp to 22333, and then it'll give you a little response thing that you joined, all right? And then what I'd like to do is ask you to answer, and all you have to do is type in an ABCD, okay? And let's see how people feel and what our belief structure is around this right now.
Were we supposed to download the app?
It's not an app. It's just, you're just texting.
Oh, I'm texting?
You're texting.
Show them that you have it up there. See, they can't see it very well.
Okay, let's see.
Can I highlight that? Yeah, right there.
Right here? So just text MCorp to the number 22. This is the phone number where you're going to text to, and you're going to text this phrase, and it's going to tell you that you joined. Sorry. Is that okay? Am I still confusing everybody? Bless you.
40% of us are failing. And that's the reality.
That's exactly right. I have a high default rate on my So this is going to measure everything real time, okay? You can't see the questions? You okay? I want to get out of your way. So 2 people have responded from what I can tell. Give it a few more minutes. Is it working for everybody? Is anybody getting any goofy thing? Ooh. It's pretty cool, isn't it?
It is really cool.
It's like watching horse races.
Yeah. It is. It is.
That's cool.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sure a few will actually come back in. So I always like to put this kind of piece out to folks to really get a clear understanding of where your mindset is and what your understandings are, what your perceptions are around how this data is affected. The answer is actually C out of the process. It's good. Oh, you guys are cheating now. It's terrible. Okay? So for everybody in the room, the answer is C. And this is a study that was run, a global study, but it was run by McKinsey. It was a global study. And what they did was they interviewed executives who had positive outcomes from their decision-making processes. And they had a lot of factors, right? And if you look at the factors, we have the study at our booth, by the way, if you actually want to pick it up, or if it's not enough there, then let me know and I can get you the digital component of it. Is that what they found was that the factors as they went through, none of them ever talked about technology or IT in the decision-making process. None. Okay? And what they really looked at, and what it came down to in the analysis, is that it's obviously a combination of things. But the number one factor that determines a positive outcome in any initiative that you're interested in is measuring the ability to execute that initiative. Can you do it? Right? And I talk to VCs about this all the time. Right? We want to know, they've got a great idea, they have great financials, really cool. Can they actually pull this off? Right? Because in venture capital, they have a default rate of 65%. You cringe. Right? Corporate America has a default rate of 56%. Right? And in government, it's somewhere close to there. Right? So it's very high, and that's why I say that this is not a government problem. And why I offer it to you is that sometimes it can be a very isolating figure that says government is a problem, and government is not a problem. Government is simply riding the wave of the different factors that are influencing what's going on. So it's not purely an institutional issue. I mean, each of you have considerations and complexities associated with your institutions, but you're not alone in the process, okay? So, what happens in the bias process is that we begin to introduce a variety of biases, right? So we have some action-oriented stuff, we gotta go, right? We've all felt that pressure. I know we don't know enough, or we may not know enough, but we've got to go. We've got to move, budget's here, available, people are here, it's an urgency issue, right? Interest bias. This is something that's very keen to me, right? It's something that I really want to be able to do. Pattern recognition bias. I'm very guilty of this, right? I look for patterns and different things that happen to be able to say, okay, that's the guiding force, all right? Stability and social bias. These are the things that decision makers apply. When there is a gap in understanding, the bias takes over, right? And so that's why, as an example, in the lending industry, they implemented the credit score. The credit score, in 1989, by FICO, was made an official thing by Congress because there was too much bias being used in how they were lending and why they were lending, okay? This is another study that was done by PricewaterhouseCoopers. And what they did is they went out and they measured several thousand projects on a post-mortem basis. What was it? What were the key factors that resulted in a bad project? Where did we go wrong, right? So in that sort of post-implementation knowledge component and collecting the information. You have a question? Read it? Okay, yeah, it's a little dark, and I apologize for that. So really the top three, 39, 30, 37. So the blue is the primary factor, what people considered the primary factor, and then the orange is the secondary factor that affected the outcome. Number one was bad estimates and missed deadlines. Okay? Number two is insufficient resources. Number three is scope changes. All right? In my perspective, none of those are IT related. Right? IT I'm going to put this out there a little bit. IT has really nothing or very little to do with the outcome of any strategic initiative. You just don't have the influence. You don't produce the budget. You don't manage or own the resources that are going into that project. All you do is the mother may I approach. Can I have, can I have, can I have? Right? You don't influence the scope. You don't own the scope. You manage the scope, but you do not own the scope. Okay? That's driven by the business side. But who's making the decision process is the business side. Who's funding typically is on the business side. Okay? So really what a lot of can be taken away from this is that if you look at the 14 factors that they measured, maybe 2 live in some type of IT sphere. Okay? So you're looking at, I think the wrong project manager can definitely be in IT, and poor quality of deliverable can be in IT. Right? Everything else is pretty much owned by the business. Right? So again, how is that decision bias affecting the roadmap going down and engaging initiatives where the investments are being made? Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm finding, based on my research, that the IT CIO is now at the C-suite with the chief officers.
Mm-hmm.
They're at the table discussing at least those companies that are on the leading edge.
Mm-hmm.
So would you say, since they're at the same office suite, they're making influential or helping the chief decision makers, swaying them in IT initiatives and the risk factors that are involved in the corporation or government or whatever?
It's a great question. So there's 2 parts to that answer. Number one is 74% of all CIOs within corporate report to the chief financial officer or below. So they may actually report to the director of finance. The CIO typically right now is not at the decision-making table, and more likely than not is not even involved in the conversation of strategy.
And that could be part of the problem.
It is a compounded effect that has come from a overcommitment of delivery capability, because IT for many, many years was the sole advocate for migrating functions from a paper or manual process to leverage technology and making it more efficient, right? Because I think everybody in the room can relate to the fact that at some point you've been at that table frustrated saying, look, if you just use some technology in this whole thing can go a whole lot better, right? And there's a resistance, and you push, and you push, and you push. But sometimes what happens is in that pushing is an overcommitment of capacity and capability. And so that delivery component then pushed it into becoming an IT project. And an IT project is not a business project. An IT project is infrastructure. It's ping power pipe process, right? That's an IT project because IT controls it. IT controls the scope of it. It is what we do. Everything else is a business project. So what happened is this misnomer to what that initiative was, because all I say to a business person who says, well, that's an IT project, right? So you can do it in paper, right? Well, we could. Okay. What would it take to do it in paper? We'd have to hire 200, 300, 400 more people to do that, because I got to process all these applications, I have to process all these checks, I have to process all these different things, right? Or I have to hire 10 more people, let's say. Be reasonable, right? So does that make it a Dunder Mifflin project? Right? So when did it shift to being an IT project? Because it's not an IT project. IT is the facilitator. IT, and that's the new role of the CIO today. So in your question, which is a very good question, is that right now the movement in industry is that IT is no longer, or the CIO is no longer the action person. They're not the person implementing, doing, managing. They are the facilitator. They are the one that is connecting all the dots and influencing policy and influencing how it should be applied, right? I don't care what you do on the business side, don't open up a security breach, right? Don't introduce 27 different operating systems. Don't buy the same software 15 times, right? It's becoming a policy, facilitation, guidance, enabler of the enterprise, not the deliverer into the enterprise. And this is being seen very, very aggressively within private sector, right? And so the challenge is that what happens is that in today's operating model, all right, we've all built a lot of skill sets to be able to run operations today, both from the technology and the business side. We've hired the people, we've trained them, we've put them in the right position, we've tuned it, we've brought it all together. Then we get that federal mandate, or that legislative mandate. And we need to go to the next step. We need to iterate and transform to the next level of service being provided to the citizenry. And depending how aggressive this transformation is, will tell you how much overlap you have between your current state of operations and your future state of operations. And the green represents what's still relevant. Because the things that you have today are not designed to work for the next iteration. So that means that you have people, process, and technology here that either has to be retrained, re-engineered, decommissioned. And again, however aggressive this is, which isn't always in everybody's hand, tells you that you may have a small or a larger overlap. The more overlap you have, the less gap you're going to have in capability. And this is where that decision bias kicks in. All right? And this is where the vulnerabilities are in delivery. Right? So what I offer is that IT and businesses don't have a technology problem. I would challenge anybody in the room to name one technology that is flaky or doesn't work.
Java.
Next. I could go on. We're out of time.
But it works, right? I mean, people joke about, I hear, SAP doesn't work, or whatever, name a product. And the reality, they have thousands, in Java, you have hundreds of thousands, millions of applications that are out there. Now, I don't know how well they work, but they're out there, right? And a lot of the things that we do on a daily basis personally rely on those platforms, and they work. The technology works, right? You don't have a technology problem. You have an execution problem, right? Can I deliver it? Can I actually do the idea? I want to run as fast as Usain Bolt. I would love to run as fast as Usain Bolt. I love that guy. That guy's amazing, right? Can't get enough of watching that guy run. And he's so happy when he does it. I want to be that guy, right? I cannot run that fast. There's no training in the world that will make me run. There is not a machine I can attach to myself other than a car or a scooter that is going to make me run that fast. I do not have that capability. I cannot enhance it. I can't. There are just things in life you cannot do, right? Understanding that gap in capability is the first measure in the decision-making process as to whether or not you actually move forward or not. Because it's about identifying the vulnerabilities that you have, and are they something you can overcome before you engage the life cycle, and you start getting public, and you start going through the machinations, or is this something that needs to be corrected before the life cycle? The program needs to pay attention to and dial in and fix, so that when you do get to life cycle, now you're accelerated. You're executing on what the life cycle was designed to do. The life cycle was never designed, ever, to fix broken operations. That's not what it's designed to do, but that's what it's been tasked to do in the last 10 years. Okay?